I'd like to convey my respects to the founder of this institution, great institution, Mr. Karsan Bhai Patel, and also Mr. Hiren Bhai Patel. This is one of the best educational institutions that I have been to. I want to say that every time I come to an educational institution, particularly law schools, those are the ones I have visited. I believe over here we have students from all disciplines. It's not only lawyers, not only law students. But each time I come to educational institutions, interact with young people, I'm filled with pride. And I'm filled with hope with regard to our future of our country. I can say that I get about 10 interns every month, and each of those interns are so bright. When I compare to our own times, when we used to join the law course, it used to be said that if you don't get admission anywhere else, you could go to law. It was a residuary. But now the best of brains, the brightest of children are opting for law as first choice. There's a great transformation, and these interns who come to me every month are the ones who prepare all the notes for my media interaction, and they prepare them in a jiffy. If you give them a problem, in half an hour they'll resolve it, and they'll get all the material. So I am very, very grateful to them for doing all that. And not only media interactions, the children, we have in our chamber regular moot courts, and each one of them is brilliant in terms of research and presentation. So there is a sea change that is taking place in law, and if in law there is going to be such a brilliant change, I'm sure in this country rule of law is going to be safe. With regard to Uniform Civil Code, before I come to that, I want to say that there are two sources of tyranny mainly which we face. One is tyranny from the government, from the state, and the other is tyranny from the society. And it is invariably the seekers of law and the decision makers in the field of law who protect the society against the tyranny, whether from the state or from the society itself. There have been growing instances of tyranny from time to time. Every decade, the judiciaries had to deal with several complex issues, and that is how the Constitution has evolved over the years. But the most recent instances, which can be termed as tyranny of the state or an example of a tyranny of the state, are Uttaranchal and Uttarakhand, where the judiciary had to intervene, and they have now gone into fresh territory, expanded even Bomai, which was argued by Mr. P.P. Rao. So therefore, the Constitution continues to evolve. Tyranny from society, which the judiciary has to deal with. One of the examples is vigilantism. How do we deal with that? People think that trial is a waste of time. The general perception with regard to presumption of innocence has been replaced by presumption of guilt. The media wants to deliver judgment instantly, as if justice is instant coffee. And lawyers are just not able to, judiciary as a whole is not able to rein them in, that please wait, allow the courts to function in accordance with the laws and the Constitution. Give them the right to an unbiased approach, but that doesn't happen. One of the most firebrand lawyers and one of the most courageous lawyers is Mr. Dave in the Supreme Court. Also most effective, but when it comes to being able to enforce presumption of innocence, it's becoming more and more difficult for us. But the greatest feature of the Constitution, which has the imprint of the personality of Mahatma Gandhi, is the right of equality. Equality between rich and the poor. Equality between high caste and the low caste. Equality between educated and uneducated. There was a lot of demand that only the educated should be given the right to vote. But Gandhiji's insistence on absolute equality, India became one of the first countries in the world where adult franchise without any discrimination on any ground, on the ground of religion or on the ground of sex, women on the midnight of the 26th of January 1950 acquired full right along with that of men in every field. They could not be discriminated against. So how is it that in spite of the fact, I want to say that my mother was a student of Cadet College in Lahore. In 1936, she wrote a poem. She was invited, she was a poet. She was invited to a Kavi Darbar, and my Nanaji told her that, sorry, girls can't leave home after dark. So she was not allowed to go. And she locked herself up in the room and wrote one of the poems which was published in a college magazine, in which she said, at the age of 17, कि कौन कहता है कि नारी पुरुष दी है जायदाद? Who says that woman is property of man? At the age of 17, she had the gumption to challenge mythology. And so she said, कौन कहता है कि नारी पुरुष दी है जायदाद? पांडवा ने जुए हारी बोली ना कुछ विचारी इसलिए है जायदाद? कौन कहता है इस नू के ताड़ना ही ठीक है? And then she says, कौन कहता है इस नू के ताड़ना ही ठीक है क्योंकि तुलसीदास दा कहना पत्थर ते लीक है. Tulsidas is supposed to have said, ढोर गवार पशु और नारी ये सब ताड़न के अधिकारी. So my mother at 17 had the courage to say, कौन कहता है इस नू के ताड़ना ही ठीक है क्योंकि तुलसीदास दा कहना पत्थर ते लीक है. कौन कहता है इस उत्ते कदे ना इतबार है पुछा मैं वारस शाह नू तेनू कहन दा की अधिकार है. That kind of revolutionary spirit was present even at that time. How is it that in this day and age, today also, we can tolerate such blatant discrimination between men and women in a particular religion? When the Constitution gives us equality, how can the constitutional mandate of equality be subjugated to personal law? Issue is not of the supremacy of the personal law. Issue is of the right of equality. and enforcement of the right of equality. Constitutional law must, in my opinion, reign supreme, even over personal law. And it must ensure safety and dignity of women. If a woman can be subjected to something like a triple talaq, there is no way her dignity can be protected. Triple talaq is an affront to the Constitution and to human dignity. India is also a signatory to the United Nations Convention on Civil and Political Rights. How can we not enforce equality amongst all parts of society? Millions of women can't be deprived of this right, in my humble view. I want to quote Dr. Ambedkar in the course of a debate in the Constituent Assembly on the supremacy of Constitution and personal rights. He said a set of laws to govern personal matters of all citizens, irrespective of religion, is the cornerstone of true secularism. We have a penal code which is secular. We have criminal procedure code which is secular. We have all the laws which apply to everyone. Law's job is to reform the society. That is how sati was outlawed. It is the thinkers, the political thinkers, who have to give direction to the society, and we must not tolerate the women of a particular religion to be deprived of their most basic and fundamental rights. I also believe that Muslim law, as understood in India, is at variance with the law as laid down by Shariat in Quran by other countries. Surah 65 of the Quran, with regard to divorce, verse 1 provides, and I'm reading the English translation, when Muslims divorce women, they divorce them for commencement of waiting period. Quran itself said that there has to be waiting period. There have to be 2 waiting periods. How can triple talaq be allowed in India? On what basis? A woman can't be divorced for no rhyme or reason, or on flimsy grounds. She can't be divorced by uttering talaq 3 times. That's against the Quran. And why are we sticking to this practice is my question. It says, Surah says that when Muslims divorce women, they divorce them for commencement of waiting period, which is 3 months and another 3-month cycles. They do not turn them out of their husband's house, nor should they themselves leave during that period unless they are committing a clear immorality. Triple talaq gives no reason. Triple talaq does not give any waiting period. So I believe that it is contrary to Surah 65 verse 1 as understood by 93% of the Muslim nations in the world. Verse 2 of Surah 65 further requires, when they have nearly fulfilled their term, that is 6 months, in 2 cycles, when they have nearly fulfilled their term, either retain them or part with them on acceptable terms. A woman is entitled to say that I don't accept these terms, even according to Quran. Now, whether the acceptance has taken place or not, verse 2 provides they have to bring two witnesses. There have to be two witnesses. How can telephonic talaq be valid then? Two just men from amongst you and establish the testimony of acceptance of Allah. I believe that it is a wrong notion that triple talaq can be permitted in Muslim religion even according to Sharia or Quran. I want to mention that triple talaq has been held to be illegal in Pakistan since 1961. On what basis are we sticking to it? Pakistan said it is triple talaq is illegal. Why are we recognizing it? Do we have no obligation towards Muslim women? Second marriage, that is polygamy, is banned in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. It is practiced here openly, and we recognize it. It is against the right of equality of women. Why must only men have the right of polygamy? The third is second marriage is discouraged in Iran, Iraq, Syria, Bangladesh. India doesn't have a different Quran. It's the same Quran according to which the Western nation, the Muslim nations themselves have provided equality to women. Why are we depriving it? Again, in Turkey and Iran, husband and wife have equal rights of talaq. Here, only the husband have the right. So, I believe that this is completely wrong. One-sided divorce, only one person saying talaq, talaq. One-sided divorce has been banned in Turkey, in Indonesia, in Iran, Iraq, Bangladesh, and yet we accept that. Triple talaq, specifically the practice of a triple talaq, which we recognize as valid, has been banned since long in Egypt, Sudan, Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So I believe that Muslim women fortunately have come forward and challenged this inequitable practice. This practice is neither in accordance with the religion nor in accordance with the constitution, nor in consonance with our obligations to the United Nations. And the women have come forward to challenge it. Supreme Court also has to enforce the treaty which has been signed by India. So it becomes the constitutional obligation, the international law obligation, and also this is a question of human dignity. Article 21 provides the right of life, and the right to life is the right to live with dignity. This robs the women, crores of women, of their dignity, which must never be accepted as to be in consonance or permissible under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So I believe that if all of you will also vote for providing equal rights and having a personal law which will have specified grounds of divorce, which will have a provision that women are entitled to live their divorced life also with dignity, and they are entitled to a certain maintenance. Only then, even if no law is made according to me, the constitutional law of the country must reign supreme. over such indignities which are inflicted upon helpless women. So I commend to you that all of you, please write on this issue. Create public opinion. The sovereignty rests with you, and you are the opinion builders of tomorrow. Thank you very much for inviting me.